just going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about what our office, the Office of Disability Accommodations, does and how it might be impacted by the new Amendment Acts. We are basically a two-person office. My colleague, Denise LeClaire, sitting here, is basically 50% of her time is allocated to disability accommodations. The other part is from a federal grant. I've been asked to clarify the 0%. There are people that think that I probably don't do much, and that's probably accurate, but I'm also responsible for 5 federally funded programs, which works with about 2,100 participants. So some of my day is taken up with that, and some of my day is taken up with students with disabilities. It's hard to pinpoint the exact time and effort on a given day. So that's the little caveat and clarification for the 0%. We're located in Harper, Suite 4008. For any faculty that haven't found us yet and will need to talk with us about proctoring exams. Currently, we have 209 students that have disclosed a disability. This is the first year we've crossed the 200 student threshold. And as you can see, about 100, if you tally up the top hidden disabilities, you're looking at about 68% of the students. And nationally, that's a fairly common number. So about 2/3 or so have hidden disabilities. Perhaps the most difficult group to work with because of the stigmatizing effect of having a hidden disability. So we do expect that number to go up. We don't know how much, but since we've crossed the 200 threshold, we don't anticipate it going down. In terms of our office and our responsibilities to provide reasonable accommodations and appropriate services, we have to ensure that all programs are offered in the most integrated setting. Amy's talked a little bit about the information that's on the next couple slides, but I'm just going to repeat that. There's a lot to digest, so in this case, repetition probably isn't a bad thing. So we provide the services in an integrated setting, and then we make modifications to academic requirements so that we're not discriminating against those that are disabled. And again, the modification which Mary mentioned, length of time of degree, consideration of course substitutions, classroom accommodations, and then again, modifications are not required if changes would substantially change the curriculum, and I'll reference that again in just a second. Reasonable accommodations and services. We're asked through Section 504, the ADA, and the Amendment Acts to evaluate student performance using appropriate accommodations. And those might be an extended time on an exam, separate quiet testing location, use of readers, scribes, use of computer, spell checker. Just 2 weeks ago at midterms, we proctored approximately 40 exams in our office, and by the end of the year, we'll be close to 1,000. So that gives you a little bit of what we do in terms of the time exam proctoring accommodation. We're also responsible for providing auxiliary aids and services, and listed are the most common sign language interpreters, priority registration, note takers, tape techs, and those others that are listed. Currently, we don't have any students that have to braille material for, but we do a lot of enlarging of material for visually impaired students. What are the implications for our work with students regarding the Amendment Acts? This is from the congressional record. I think this is a pretty good example of government speak, which leads to some of the confusion. If you look at the first couple sentences, we have the discretion to establish appropriate and reasonable documentation requirements. But then 2 sentences below it says, we expect the less demanding standard will be applied. So they tell us that we can do one thing, but there's going to be a less demanding standard, and clearly that's the part that we don't know much about at this point. And because of the nature of our society, probably will be determined in the courts. from the Senate report, the amendments do not impact the process of determining reasonable accommodations. And for our purposes, I'm interpreting that as the major three things that we ask for aren't going to change. The student is going to have to disclose the disability. They're going to have to provide documentation, a degree yet to be determined. And Kevin will probably talk a little bit about that. And then they'll have to request appropriate accommodations. So those three things I don't see changing any. The last part, again, makes reference to fundamentally altering the nature of programs and services. And again, to reiterate, that is not going to change. But the important point, I think there, and Amy touched on that, is the review process. I mean, in the past, it's been very easy to have a faculty member say, no, this request is going to change the curriculum or my course content. Now I think they're asking for a little bit more substantive information on why that would happen. We just can't make a blanket statement about how that might change it. So that's something that we'll have to look at in terms of our policies and procedures. The next couple slides just are some general information from some presentations I put together in the last year or two with the last few items directly addressing some faculty concerns. Individuals with disabilities are the nation's largest minority, and this is from the 2008 estimated census. With the 2010 census, I'm sure we'll find this number increasing. The ADA referenced 43 million in 1990, so clearly the number of individuals with disabilities is on the rise. If you do not have a disability, you have about a 20% chance of becoming disabled. So someday you might be in the process of looking for an appropriate accommodation. Nationally, 11% of undergraduates reported being disabled in 03-04. I didn't have any current information, but I assume that that is closer to the mid-teens to upper teens now. In 2005, our ADA committee surveyed faculty and staff, and we're looking to update this survey. But a couple items from this survey struck me as interesting. 54% of the individuals that responded said, yes, they know who to contact if a student approaches them and asks for an accommodation due to a disability. We would hope that'd be a little closer to 100%. So we're wondering what the other 46% are doing. 63% responded no. If you've ever made an accommodation for a student, did you involve the Office of Disability Accommodations? So we're not sure what's happening out there. We assume students are receiving accommodations, faculty are doing something. Our office would just like to be kept in the loop in terms of what's going on. So again, events like this hopefully educate individuals about our office's policies and procedures of the university so that these numbers can approach a little more closer to 100%. We'll find out with the new updated survey if we've made progress. Post-secondary institutions are mandated to provide equal access. This doesn't mean that we must guarantee success, and this is the hardest part in dealing with students with disabilities. We take a lot of money from these students at this university, and then to fail them is difficult. To tell them, for example, that perhaps an area of interest that they have is not where they belong, and that can be very difficult. We've had faculty ask, is it okay if I fail the students? And clearly, yes. I mean, if we've provided the accommodations, we've done everything necessary. They have every right to fail, just like everyone else. Section 504 of the ADA and the Amendment Acts do not support retroactive accommodations. That's something that has been critical to our work since the passage of the ADA. Someone cannot disclose a disability and then say, look, I failed this exam 2 weeks ago, can we do something about it? So again, the whole retroactive nature of the law does not apply. Office of Civil Rights found that the obligation of note takers should not fall on the student, but is an instructor responsibility. With the passage of the ADA in the early 90s, we had a lot of faculty wondering about if it was their responsibility to identify note takers for students, if that was a reasonable accommodation. And clearly the courts have said yes, it is. Compliance is a university-wide responsibility, where faculty can be held personally liable for not providing reasonable accommodations. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then I added the last part, the next item, since we do have a number of adjunct faculty coming on board, I think, and I'm not sure what happens within the academic orientations, but clearly they need to have information about the university's policies and procedures regarding the ADA in general, and certainly the students with disabilities. We've met a number of adjunct faculty this year and have talked to them about responsibilities. So something to keep in mind. And then the last item is if you don't have an announcement on your syllabus that lets students know about requesting accommodations, I would encourage you to do that, and I've provided an example for that. And that's all I have.